Did you know? The DS was so successful at launch that Nintendo considered giving up on consoles altogether to focus solely on handhelds. Or that later, Reggie wanted to price the Wii so low that it would dethrone the PlayStation 2 as the best-selling system of all time? And that the Virtual Console wasn't created for you, but for your mom? The DS-Wii generation was the start of a new chapter in Nintendo's history, where they abandoned hardware power to focus on innovation and rethinking what video games could be. The plan? Forfeit the console wars to Sony and make hardware that didn't even try to compete. Across the ocean, Nintendo was led by two outsiders, Satoru Iwata and Reggie Fils-Aime, who weren't sure if the strategy would even work. But in the end, they sold more systems and games than any generation before or since. As usual, we dug through books, Japanese magazines, and various interviews looking for insights for this video. So here's a collection of some of the best stories and quotes we came across from Nintendo's DS-Wii era. We'll start by establishing our two main characters. Iwata and Reggie's paths to Nintendo are actually pretty similar. They came from outside the company, rapidly rose to leadership, and were much younger than their predecessors. Iwata left HAL Labs to join Nintendo in 2000. Then a couple years later, he got promoted to president. For his entire career, he declined moving into the former president's lavish office, instead preferring a smaller, simpler office more like a conference room, full of books, video games, controllers, and accessories. Iwata ate so much candy in meetings that people nicknamed him Kirby. He was too busy for the gym, so he stayed in shape by playing Wii Fit in his office. As Reggie remembers, it was more of a game creator's office than that of a company president. As for Reggie, he left VH1 to join Nintendo of America back in 2003. Then a couple years later, Iwata promoted him to Nintendo of America's president. Now, everyone knows Iwata is as big a gamer as they come, a genius programmer from childhood who developed dozens of games and played even more. But a lot of people seem to think Reggie wasn't a gamer. While it's true he didn't make games, he did play them. Reggie grew up in the 70s playing Atari, Magnavox, and Coleco systems, and he also went to arcades with his friends. As an adult, he bought his first Nintendo system, a Super NES bundled with Super Mario World. True to his overachieving completionist nature, he 100%ed it with all secrets and 99 lives when the credits rolled. He writes in his book, "It was a testament to skill, but also to using information from magazines like Nintendo Power and Electronic Gaming Monthly. I owned and played more than 70 games. The average owner of the system had about 8 games. I was a super user of the Super NES. He got his son into gaming too. In fact, he beat Street Fighter 2 when he was just 3 years old, prompting Reggie to mail in a photo to Nintendo Power." There's more stories, but to cut to the chase, he later got an N64. Then the following generation, a PS2 and Xbox, but not a GameCube. That's when he got recruited to work at Nintendo. He'd seen Nintendo's influence waning around the world and even in his own home. Colleagues warned him not to jump aboard Nintendo's sinking ship, but he was inspired by more than a paycheck. Quote, "I'd played all the Mario, Pokemon, and Smash Bros. Games, and I loved the Zelda franchise. I wasn't just a hired gun to try and help turn the company around. I had a passion for the industry and for Nintendo." After becoming the face of Nintendo of America, he'd admit to still playing PS2 games, but framed it as if it were market research to keep an eye on what the competition was doing. Frankly though, we suspect he secretly enjoyed these games. He wasn't playing GTA for work, it was for pleasure. Let's rewind slightly. Everyone knows DS was the first hardware launch under Iwata's presidency. But what's not as well known is that the idea actually came from the former president, Hiroshi Yamauchi. He was always willing to try wild ideas, like Satellaview and Virtual Boy. And late in his reign, he'd often have meetings with Iwata, Itoy, and Miyamoto. President Yamauchi was infamous for never smiling, remembers Iwata. But when he spoke with us, he always grinned like crazy. I remember one iconic episode where he recommended we make a game console that had 2 screens. But at the time, I thought it was a metaphorical way of saying, we should make something totally unlike anything that's come before. Eventually, they realized he was literally suggesting a system with 2 screens. Iwata and Miyamoto mulled it over for a long time, until one day they were standing in a restaurant parking lot and Iwata yelled, "I've got it." They'd make one of them a touchscreen, which at the time were mostly just on PDAs. We guess you could say that that was the day DS was born. Nintendo worked on it in secret for a couple of years, but halfway through, Sony announced their PSP. They didn't even show it off. All they had to do was utter the words, PlayStation Portable, and it sent Nintendo's stock plummeting 18%. Sony had already stolen Nintendo's console empire, and now they were coming for handhelds too. Don't waste your time on fighting, said Yamauchi. If Nintendo tries to fight, it's gonna lose. For the past decade, Nintendo fought console wars with horsepower, but no amount of power was ever enough to beat PlayStation. So instead of fighting them head-on again, Nintendo changed focus to affordability and innovation. Iwata recalls, "We made it absolutely clear that our mission was to shock people, in a good way. When we announced we're going to release a console that has 2 screens and a touch panel, most people must have thought, Nintendo's gone off the deep end. In our eyes, staying the course meant that we had no future, but the average person probably thought it was a crazy idea."
I suppose I could give you a list of our technical specs. I believe you'd like that, but I won't for a simple reason. They really don't matter. The time when horsepower alone made an important difference is over.
That strategy took guts in the early 2000s. It ran contrary to what the industry was doing, and had done since the start, so taking the opposite path was a long shot. They cooked up a new software strategy too. DS would have experiences most people wouldn't even consider games, like petting a dog or training your brain. It was the blue ocean strategy, trying to convert normal people into Nintendo fans instead of fighting over a shrinking population of hardcore gamers. Core gamers would be catered to as well, of course, with franchises like Mario, Pokemon, and Animal Crossing. In essence, they planned a 50-50 split of traditional games and experimental software. At E3 2004, Reggie was the first to show the world Nintendo DS. It was also his very first public appearance.
My name is Reggie. I'm about kicking ass, I'm about taking names, and we're about making games.
You know, reading up for this video, we'd kind of forgotten how much Reggie swore in the DS Wii era. Even some bigger swears you can't utter on TV, like when he said Microsoft was losing an S-load of money on every Xbox. What's funny is he actually had to get Iwata's permission to talk like that. But anyway, you might have noticed that the DS looks different than how it launched. That's because E3 goers harshly criticized its blurry screen and said it felt clunky and cheap in your hands. So Nintendo spent the next couple months taking these criticisms to heart and tweaking the hardware. Ultimately, the new strategy and last-minute revisions paid off. DS sold beyond Nintendo's wildest dreams, consistently out of stock even when they ramped up production to 2 million a month. Iwata said it was, quote, too good to be true. That he would have been naive to even hope for this kind of success. It was outselling the PSP 2-1, and Nintendo's first ever victory over Sony, which is ironic seeing as they only managed to win after they gave up fighting. DS was so successful right out the gate that Nintendo wondered if they should even make another console. Maybe just throw all their resources at the handheld market and forfeit the living room to Sony. Miyamoto told Famitsu, "It raised the question, maybe DS is enough?" We were strongly debating if making another home console was even necessary. At the time, the Japanese market was shifting from consoles to handhelds. Even worse, Nintendo's consoles had been in decline since Famicom, with every generation selling less than the one before. It had gotten so bad that Nintendo's market share shriveled from a dominant 90% down to a paltry 15%, with Sony now controlling most of the rest. Meanwhile, Nintendo still had over 90% of the handheld market. Perhaps now was the time to refocus the company on what was working, instead of continuing to fight a war they'd already lost. Ultimately, Nintendo did come to a sobering conclusion, that they couldn't beat Sony. But they'd make another console anyway that wouldn't fight PlayStation. Instead, it would take the same path as DS. We produced boxes upon boxes of mock-ups and prototype devices, remembers Iwata. No one knew at the beginning how the Wii was going to turn out, just that we wouldn't find the answers by sticking to the usual routes. All we knew was the direction we were heading in. Eventually, they started thinking how Japanese homes changed in recent years. When Famicom became popular in the 80s, people switched from having one shared television in the living room to smaller TVs in each bedroom. But in the early 2000s, digital broadcasting brought TVs back into the living room. And instead of boxy CRTs, now people had massive flat screens. The larger screen, shared by the whole family, made different experiences possible compared to what a kid would play alone in their room. And the screen being flat provided a little more floor space to move around. Suddenly, Nintendo realized they should design the console around this new living room. This was a breakthrough, said Iwata. Japanese homes are often shared by several generations, from kids to grandparents, so the Wii would need to be as inviting as possible, even to people who thought video games were childish or intimidating. So Iwata challenged his team to make the console no larger than 3 DVD cases stacked on top of each other, about 1/6 the size of a PlayStation 3. Instead of a futuristic or techie aesthetic, it'd be simple white. UI presented like channels on a TV, with games displayed no more prominently than any other channel. And the controller would look like a TV remote, so not even grandma would feel confused or shy about using it. To that end, Iwata insisted it be called a Wii Remote, not a controller. Quote, "The question of why everybody in the family will pick up the TV remote but won't pick up a video game controller was a driving concept behind the console's development. It would have weather, news, and photo albums for mom and dad. Games to keep grandma and grandpa's brains sharp. Mario and Zelda for the actual gamers in the household, and games everyone could play together in that extra floor space." But at times, Iwata took the concept a little too far. I asked myself repeatedly, what can we do to prevent video games from being seen as an intrusion on family life? This led to the hypothesis, or perhaps the absurd proposition, of a feature that would allow parents to set daily time limits for gaming, say 1 hour per day, where the console would physically shut off after 1 hour of gameplay. I'll admit this feature was a bit aggressive, but all the same, I was dead serious. Some argued this was unacceptable, while others said that such extremes were necessary to change the minds of mothers worried about how much time their children spent gaming. Ultimately, the feature did not make it in. Instead, they added a play history section, so mom can keep tabs on what the kids are playing and for how long. In addition, the console would frequently encourage kids to take a break and go outside. It wasn't just a business tactic, but a personal conviction as well. Iwata said, "It makes me happy when people have fun playing our video games, but I'm not hoping for other amusements to fall by the wayside. When I was little, I had fun playing all kinds of different ways, and truly valued those experiences." By the way, the idea for both of those features came from Earthbound, a game Iwata saved from development hell, where Ness's dad occasionally calls, suggesting his son take a break. One of the Wii's most important guiding principles was that moms can't hate it. Iwata said it again and again, "Mom can't hate it, or it'll have an uphill battle getting into the living room. She's the gatekeeper." Video games drive mom crazy, he said. She has to pick up the controllers once the kids are done playing. They've already got multiple consoles plugged into the TV, and she doesn't want another one. They're a nuisance as far as she's concerned. Which explains a lot about the Wii, including why Virtual Console was created. Its purpose wasn't revenue, because really it never made much, especially with its older systems like PC Engine and Commodore 64. The real reason was so kids could unplug their old consoles, pack up their game stacks, and shove it all in a closet, leaving just the small, inoffensive Wii. Moms detest clutter, so Virtual Console was another way to win them over. And if mom happened to play games when she was a kid, that was an added bonus, as a way of appealing to her nostalgia with games from her childhood. All this was also a plan to destigmatize gaming, by the way, to disassociate gamers from their reputation as sweaty-palmed teenagers, to get everyone playing so Nintendo sells a whole lot of Wiis and the stereotype disappears. Win-win. Core gamers should realize that we're creating a better environment for their hobby, said Miyamoto. Consistent with everything else, and just like DS, Wii would be affordable for families and forfeit the console wars. In fact, it was so underpowered that Iwata consistently told press that the Wii was not a next-generation console. It was only barely more powerful than the GameCube, and unlike PS3 and Xbox 360, it wasn't HD. Those other consoles cost $75 a year in electricity, but the Wii would cost less than $20. It would have last-gen software prices too, with games $50 or less, while Sony and Microsoft charged $60. And Iwata announced the Wii itself would cost under $300. At E3 2006, Sony shocked the world when they announced the PlayStation 3's price of $600. Press urged Reggie to recreate PlayStation 1's famous price announcement from a decade before. Just imagine Reggie using their own iconic reveal against them.
$299.
Unfortunately, Nintendo was still undecided on Wii's exact price. The New York Times ended up leaking its $250 price tag, stealing Nintendo's chance to make a splash of their own. Despite all that, Reggie managed to get in a few barbs at E3 anyway. Quote, "When I first heard their announcement, I was surprised. Arguably, you could say shocked. When I heard the arrogance in their comments to support the price, I was even further shocked. They will do what they will do, and we will do what we will do." The comments he threw shade at came from Sony executives, who said $600 shouldn't be a problem for fans, and that they should take on more hours at work to be able to afford it. In his book, Reggie tells a behind-the-scenes story from that same E3, laying the foundations for his relationship with Iwata. They'd met before and hit it off, but at E3, he was a vice president lower on the totem pole. Wii Sports was so well received early in the press conference that Iwata wanted to change plans to spend more time showing it off later at the expo, at the cost of making less time for Zelda. Reggie strongly disagreed, and after an intense debate, he got what he wanted. Iwata went silent, and Reggie realized refusing his boss's plan might have been a bridge too far. A loss of face, a faux pas. A week later, Iwata arranged a flight back to America and scheduled an early meeting with Reggie. It was highly unusual, and Reggie thought he was about to get fired, or at least punished in some way. So he prepared a 20-page PowerPoint detailing how Zelda's showcase had been the right call. He was ready to defend himself, but once the meeting started, he was surprised to hear he wasn't fired. Instead, Iwata promoted him to president of Nintendo of America. In years to come, they'd usually agree on paths forward, though still had occasional disagreements. But either way, they always worked as a team. After getting to know each other better, Iwata told him, "Reggie, you know we are very much alike. Nintendo is a company where employees tend to stay for a very long time. But you and I are outsiders. We have a unique challenge to understand and keep the company's culture while also pushing the company forward. I am trying to push Nintendo in a new way, yet Mr. Miyamoto and others have been a part of the company for a very long time. I need to make sure they are with me as we go on this journey." In November, we launched the same week as the PlayStation 3. Sony had shooters, racers, and sports games. Nintendo's two big launch titles were Wii Sports and Zelda, a perfect expression of their split software strategy. Metroid Prime 3 was actually supposed to be a third launch game. I guess you could say as an even more hardcore title, but it ended up getting delayed almost a year. That hampered Metroid's popularity going forward, but the console itself didn't suffer for it. We outsold the PlayStation 3 3-1 out the gate, and by the end of the generation, won by 15 million units. Just like the DS, Nintendo only managed to beat Sony because they refused to fight. The pacifist blue ocean strategy. First in the handheld market, and now, finally, with a home console. As Iwata put it, we'd been challengers for 10 years, but now they had emerged victorious at last. It would end up as Nintendo's greatest generation, with more systems and games sold than any other era, to this very day, which is especially impressive considering it was during the Great Recession. Now is a good time to talk about what Reggie actually did that generation. Some people think Nintendo of America's president doesn't do anything, except carry out Japan's marching orders. Obviously, there's a lot of invisible day-to-day marketing and management, but we'll just highlight some of what we see as his biggest achievements. For starters, previous Nintendo systems initially launched in Japan, then overseas months later, when there was enough inventory. But Reggie lobbied to get the DS released in America first and get more units allocated stateside so there'd be ample supply. Thanks to that, Americans had DSs at every retail store just in time for Black Friday, which not only got it a head start on PSP, but also made it possible for kids to get a DS for Christmas that year. I was one of them, by the way. But that's not all he did for the DS's launch. Like Prime 3 on Wii, Metroid Prime Hunters was originally supposed to be a DS launch title. Those games always have trouble in development though, and once again, Hunters got massively delayed. So Reggie pushed for Nintendo to make a demo called First Hunt and include it for free with DS's at launch. Japan didn't get that free demo. Famously, he also fought to make Wii Sports a free pack-in against Miyamoto, who opposed giving content away for free. That story's been told countless times, and we're obviously thankful, because it gave us cherished memories with mom and dad, who otherwise didn't play video games. But we want to look closer at what that free game did not for us, but for the system itself. In Japan, they didn't get the free game. We sold fine over there, but not as well as earlier consoles. In all the regions Wii Sports was included, it became a phenomenon, and we sold double any previous system. Just look at this chart and soak in the implications. If Reggie hadn't fought for the pack-in, statistically, we probably only would have sold about 70 million units worldwide, which is less than the PS3 and Xbox 360. But because they did pack it in, we sold over 100 million. Looked at that way, if Japan got Wii Sports 2, they might have sold 30 million more. Reggie also fought to bundle Wii Play with extra Wiimotes. It wasn't totally free since a standalone controller sold for $40, and together with Wii Play, it cost $50. So basically, the game cost an extra $10. But it was a good deal for us fans, and contributed to Wii Play selling 30 million copies, making it the 5th best-selling game on the system. Reggie was also constantly pushing to discount the hardware. Halfway into the generation, we had already gotten a price cut from $250 to $200. But soon after, Reggie was negotiating with Iwata to cut it deeper to $150 and eventually $99, so we could, quote, be the best-selling system of all time and dethrone the PlayStation 2. Iwata said $99 would probably never be possible because of component costs. The price did come down to $150 though. Then at the end of the generation, $130 with a couple free games. But Reggie wanted to cut sooner and deeper. To be clear, we're talking MSRP, because some individual retailers did go as low as $99 during sales. And we're talking about the full featured console, not the Wii Mini. So all that to say, Reggie stuck his neck out to get us good deals, early launches, and lots of inventory. A lot of those deals were extended to Europe too, and on rare occasion, even Japan, making Nintendo a lot of money in the process. Although anytime we mention Reggie, there's a few folks in the comments mad at him, and it's usually over one particular controversy. We've gotten chastised for glossing over it in the past, so we'll rectify that here. The story's that initially he decided against localizing a few Japanese RPGs, most notably Xenoblade Chronicles, The Last Story, and Pandora's Tower. It was late in the Wii's lifespan, and he thought they were too niche with lots of text and hundreds of hours of voice acting, and thus localization was a risky investment unlikely to pay off. In response, fans organized a grassroots campaign to get them localized, and Nintendo of Europe ultimately did it themselves. Afterwards, the games made their way stateside. But Reggie's original decision remains controversial and explains why to this day, Xenoblade characters have British accents instead of American, which might be a good thing. As Reggie admits in his book, no one bats 1,000, including himself. Another miss was Reggie fighting to knock $50 off the 3DS's launch price, because he wasn't able to make it happen, and in his book called it his biggest failure in all his years at Nintendo. That's a story for another video though, when we talk about the next generation. Until then, if you want to see the full life stories of Iwata, Reggie, Miyamoto, Yokoi, and more Nintendo icons, click the video on screen. If you enjoyed my narration of this script, my name's HBR Shredder. I make retrospectives on Famicom games. If that sounds up your alley, click the other video. Special thanks to our translator Jacob, and proofreaders Luigi, Aaron Rowe, Splets, and Phil Waller. And of course, thank you for watching. See you next time.